The first time Mark called our daughter manipulative. She was lying on the bathroom floor, shaking, crying, her little fingers clinging to my shirt as she vomited into a towel. "Julia," he said, voice flat from the bedroom doorway. "You're seriously falling for that again?" I looked up from where I was kneeling beside Ella. Her fever had hit 102.3, her face pale and soaked with sweat. I was about to ask him to bring another towel, maybe help me get her cleaned up, but the look on his face froze the words in my throat. "She's faking," he added, arms crossed. "She figured out that pretending to be sick gets her out of school and earns your undivided attention. Don't reward her for it." That night, I didn't sleep. Not because Ella was sick, though she was violently so, but because something in me snapped. Mark had always been disconnected, emotionally stunted, maybe. But this wasn't just ignorance. It was cruelty wrapped in self-righteousness. He watched his 4-year-old daughter heave her tiny stomach out onto the floor, and the only thing he saw was a performance. That wasn't a father. That was a man too broken to recognize pain in others, because he'd buried his own too deep to feel it anymore. Mark's beliefs about illness weren't new. When my sister was diagnosed with anxiety during the early months of COVID, he scoffed and said she needed to go run 3 miles and sweat it out. When I caught the flu 2 winters ago and spent 2 days in bed, he brought me tea once, then said I was over-dramatizing a minor bug. He doesn't believe in sick days. Doesn't believe in medication unless you're literally dying. Doesn't believe, apparently, in basic human compassion. He claims it's how he was raised. In his family, being sick was weakness. His father used to say things like, "Real men don't puke," and "coughing is for cowards." It's like someone handed him a manual titled Toxic Masculinity 101, and he studied it religiously. I thought things would change when Ella was born. Surely, I believed no one could hold a newborn in their arms and still believe vulnerability was a sin. But I was wrong. Mark was distant even then. When she cried at night, he would roll over and say, "She's manipulating you. Let her cry it out." When I went back to work part-time, he'd sometimes forget to feed her lunch, claimed it would strengthen her survival instincts. We fought about it more than once. At one point, I threatened legal action if he didn't start meeting her basic needs. He shaped up a little, fed her, bathed her, helped with bedtime, but he never truly understood what it meant to be emotionally present. And when it came to illness, that wall never cracked. Not once. Vaccines were a battlefield. Fevers were psychosomatic. Even allergies. Made-up excuses by pharmaceutical companies to sell Claritin. That's who he was. And I'd made peace with managing around it. Until that night. Until Ella's tiny body curled against mine on the bathroom tiles, her sobs muffled against my chest, while Mark stood just a few feet away and called her a liar. I didn't say anything then. I tucked her in after she fell asleep. I cleaned the bathroom. I canceled my shift at the hospital the next day to stay home with her while she continued vomiting. Mark went to work like nothing had happened. That night, he looked at me as I sat on the edge of the bed and said, "I still think she faked it." I stared at him, and all I could think was, if you can't believe a child when they're shaking in your arms, what else will you dismiss? Her heartbreak someday? Her fear? Her dreams? Something shifted in me that night. A line was drawn. I wasn't going to argue anymore. I wasn't going to beg for empathy. I was going to wait. Because karma, in my experience, never forgets an address. It wasn't the first time Mark had reduced someone's pain to a performance, but it was the first time that someone was his own daughter. I remember years ago, sitting across from him at the kitchen table while I tried to explain my sister Caroline's panic attacks. She'd been struggling since high school, trouble breathing, shaking hands, a feeling like the walls were closing in. "She needs support," I said gently, not judgment. Mark had laughed. "She needs a treadmill and a reality check. Everyone gets stressed. Doesn't mean you have a disorder." He said it so casually, as if labeling pain made it less real. And it wasn't just my sister. When I was pregnant with Ella and suffered from relentless morning sickness, Mark suggested I stop reading those dramatic mommy blogs and focus on positive energy. When my coworker had a miscarriage, he told me she was probably just exaggerating the grief. It's not like she held the baby, he'd shrugged. Each time, I'd swallowed my outrage. I told myself he just didn't understand. That maybe, with time and exposure and love, he'd learn to be softer. But Mark didn't learn. Not really. He adapted just enough to appear functional. He changed diapers. He showed up to preschool orientation. He remembered Ella's favorite bedtime story. But he never changed what was underneath. The belief that vulnerability was a trick. That pain was weakness. That love required proof. And when Ella got sick, really sick for the first time in her life, that belief came roaring back like it had been waiting for an opportunity to assert itself. I watched him stare at her from across the room with a mixture of annoyance and detachment, as if her illness was a personal inconvenience. What he didn't see, what he refused to see, was the way she flinched when he raised his voice. The way she looked at me, confused, when he wouldn't hold her hair back. The way she whispered, "Why won't Daddy believe me?" That whisper lodged in my spine like a thorn. I had spent 4 years protecting Ella from the darker parts of her father's personality. I ran interference. I softened his edges. I stepped in when he snapped, made excuses when he withdrew, and filled in the emotional gaps he left behind. I told myself I was shielding her. But that night, when she looked at me with wide eyes full of betrayal, I realized something else. Maybe I wasn't protecting her. Maybe I was enabling him. There's a moment in every marriage where you stop hoping for change and start planning for impact. Mine came in the quiet space between Ella's sobs and Mark's indifference. In that space, I saw the shape of my future. One where my daughter learned to doubt her own experiences because the man who was supposed to believe her most treated her pain like an inconvenience. And I couldn't let that happen. The next day, I called off work. I stayed home and fed Ella sips of water, held cool cloths to her forehead, cleaned up after every bout of vomiting. I monitored her fever and kept her in clean pajamas. I rubbed her back and sang softly when she couldn't sleep. Mark didn't help. In fact, he rolled his eyes when I mentioned how many times she'd thrown up. She probably snuck something sweet when you weren't looking. Kids are sneaky like that. His voice was coated in condescension, like he thought I'd been played by a 4-year-old criminal mastermind. That night, after Ella finally fell asleep, I sat in the darkened kitchen, staring at nothing. I felt hollowed out, by exhaustion, by anger, by something deeper I didn't yet have a name for. Mark walked in, poured himself a glass of wine, and said, "She'll be fine by tomorrow. You'll see. And next time, maybe don't give in to the theatrics so quickly." I didn't look at him, didn't speak, didn't trust myself to open my mouth without screaming. But inside, something shifted again, not a crack this time, but a fracture. He wasn't just wrong. He was dangerous, not the kind that bruises skin, but the kind that leaves scars you can't explain. 3 weeks later, it was his turn. It started with him waking up nauseous, pale, and irritable. I was in the kitchen making Ella's breakfast when he shuffled in, hunched over and holding his stomach. "I think I ate something bad last night," he mumbled, sinking into a chair. I didn't flinch. "Maybe. Or maybe you're just looking for attention." He blinked at me, confused. I set down Ella's bowl of cereal, kissed her hair, and walked past him with barely a glance. I had work to do, a child to care for. His stomach ache didn't register on my radar, not after what he'd done. The vomiting came that afternoon. Loud, violent. I heard it from upstairs while Ella and I built a tower out of blocks in the living room. The sound made her pause. "Mommy," she whispered, "is Daddy okay?" I shrugged, probably just being dramatic. You know how he gets. She didn't laugh. She just watched me carefully, like she was trying to understand a joke that didn't feel very funny. By evening, Mark was curled on the bathroom floor, clutching his sides, begging for water. His face was ghostly, hair matted to his forehead. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed, and tilted my head slightly. I think I remember you once telling my sister to just go outside and sweat it out. Maybe give that a try." He glared at me, but he didn't respond. His stomach answered for him, another dry heave echoing off the tile. "Julia, please," he croaked. "I can't even stand. I need water. I need help." I leaned against the doorframe, heart pounding, not from fear, not from pity, but from clarity. "You're probably fine," I said. "Ella threw up for 2 days, remember? And you said she was just acting. So maybe that's what you're doing now." His face contorted, not just from nausea, but from the slow, dawning realization that I was serious, that I meant every word. "I'm not pretending," he gasped. "No," I said, voice low, "because I remember a man standing in this exact hallway 3 weeks ago, looking at his feverish daughter and accusing her of faking. So forgive me if I don't rush to your aid." I turned to leave, but he grabbed the frame of the door with trembling fingers. "Julia, don't do this. I'm actually sick." "So was she," I said. "She was 4, and she begged you to help her." I walked away then, not because I didn't care, but because I cared too much. Because I knew that if I gave in now, if I offered him kindness without accountability, it would all go back to how it was before. And I couldn't do that to Ella. Not again. Downstairs, she was coloring a picture of a house with 3 stick figures in front of it. One with long hair, one small with pigtails, and one taller, standing apart from the others. "Is Daddy still sick?" she asked. "Yes, sweetheart," I said, handing her a fresh sheet of paper. "He's not feeling well today." She frowned and stirred her spoon through her cereal, her little brow furrowed. "When I was sick, Daddy said I was pretending. Was I pretending, Mommy?" My heart cracked clean down the center. I sat beside her and brushed her hair back gently. "No, baby, you were really sick. Sometimes Daddy doesn't understand things the way he should." She nodded slowly. Then from upstairs, another wave of retching filled the air. Ella's eyes widened. "That's what I sounded like," she whispered. I pulled her into my lap, held her close, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. "I know, sweetheart. And I stayed with you, because that's what we do when someone we love is hurting." She looked up at me, serious now. "But you're not taking care of Daddy." The innocence of the observation hit me like a fist. I kissed her forehead and gently placed her back in her chair. "Finish your breakfast, okay? I need to check on something." I didn't go upstairs right away. I poured her some more milk. I wiped the counter. I breathed, because I knew that what I was doing wasn't cruel. It was necessary. By mid-morning, Mark had made his way downstairs, pale and shaking. He leaned against the kitchen counter, barely able to keep his eyes open. I was making toast for Ella, something light, something familiar. He opened his mouth, but before he could say anything, I cut in. "You don't look well," I said, "but I'm sure it's all in your head." He blinked at me, confused, like he didn't recognize the words. Then he realized they were his, the same ones he'd spoken to Ella 3 weeks ago. He said nothing. Ella, sitting at the kitchen table with her crayons and her cereal, looked up at him. "Daddy," she said softly, "when I was sick, you said I was making it up. Are you making it up too?" Mark froze. His hand gripped the counter a little tighter, and for a moment he looked so much smaller than usual, like the weight of her words had actually hit somewhere deeper than his gut. "I'm not making it up, sweetie," he said hoarsely. "I really am sick." "Oh," Ella said simply. Then she added, "Maybe you should convince yourself you're not sick. That's what you told Mommy to tell Aunt Caroline when she had the sad sickness." The color drained from his face completely. I bit the inside of my cheek, not to keep from laughing, but to keep from crying. The truth of children is that they never say things to hurt, they just tell you what they remember. And what she remembered, word for word, was the lack of belief. After Mark stumbled back upstairs, Ella turned to me and asked, "Mommy, does it work? Convincing yourself you're not sick." I shook my head slowly. "No, baby, it doesn't." We spent the rest of the morning in our little bubble. I helped her write her name on construction paper, read 2 picture books about dinosaurs, and even made Play-Doh cookies that she warned me, very seriously, were definitely not for eating. Every so often, we heard Mark move overhead, a groan, the flush of the toilet, a thud against the wall. Ella paused once during coloring, looked toward the ceiling, and asked, "Mommy, should we make Daddy soup? You made me soup when I was sick." The innocence in her voice cracked something in me. Here was this tiny person, offering empathy that her father couldn't find for her. She wasn't keeping score. She was just remembering kindness and wanting to share it. I knelt beside her, brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, and said, "That's very thoughtful of you, sweetheart. But remember how Daddy said being sick is just in your head? If it's not real, he probably doesn't need soup, does he?" She considered this with a wrinkled brow, that serious little frown only small children make when trying to puzzle out the world. But what if it is real? What if his tummy really hurts like mine did? "Then maybe," I said quietly, "he'll understand how you felt when he didn't believe you." She nodded slowly, but the weight of that lesson, it was heavy for 4-year-old shoulders. Too heavy. Was I doing the right thing? I didn't want to raise her to believe in revenge. But I also couldn't raise her to believe that her pain should be dismissed. That love meant tolerating indifference. At around 1 o'clock, Mark reappeared, gripping the doorframe like it was the only thing holding him upright. His eyes were hollow, his cheeks sunken. Ella looked up from her coloring and said, with the same calm tone she always used when describing a butterfly or a picture book, "Daddy, you look really sick." Mark barely nodded. He shuffled to the fridge, poured water with shaking hands, and spilled half of it on the counter. Ella set down her crayon and tilted her head. "Daddy, remember when I was sick and you said I was pretending? Were you pretending?" He stared at her, then at me, then back at her. For the first time since I'd known him, he had no answer. That afternoon, Mark tried to eat a few spoonfuls of plain rice. He barely got it past his lips before running to the bathroom again. Ella watched him go, then looked up at me, her brow furrowed in concern. "Mommy, why won't you help Daddy?" I sat beside her, gently smoothing her hair. "Do you remember when you were sick, sweetheart? When you asked Daddy for help and he said you were pretending?" She nodded slowly. It made me feel really sad and scared. My tummy hurt so bad, and he didn't believe me. "Well," I said, "now Daddy is learning what it feels like when someone doesn't believe you." She was quiet for a long time. Then she whispered, "But 2 wrongs don't make a right. That's what Mrs. Thompson says." I blinked. The words stung, not because they were wrong, but because they were so achingly true. And they were coming from the mouth of a 4-year-old who'd already seen more emotional neglect than any child ever should. Before I could answer, Mark stumbled out of the bathroom again. He made it 3 steps before his legs gave out, collapsing against the wall. Ella gasped and stood up, but I gently put a hand on her shoulder. "Finish your lunch, baby. Daddy's just being dramatic." Mark looked up at me with bloodshot eyes. "Julia, please. I think I'm dehydrated. I need 4 fluids. I need to go to urgent care." I crossed my arms. "You once told my sister that doctors were a scam, remember? That they just push pills to make money. That the human body can heal itself if we just toughen up." He shut his eyes, defeated. Ella was no longer eating. She was watching him with worry, but also confusion. I saw it in her little face, that warring impulse between compassion and memory. "Mommy," she whispered, "Daddy looks really bad." I nodded slowly. "Yes, he does. Maybe we should help him now." "Maybe," I said, "but sometimes people need to really feel something before they understand what it means to hurt someone else." We left him there on the floor and went upstairs. I helped Ella change into her favorite purple dress with butterflies on the sleeves, braided her hair into 2 neat plaits. She kept glancing toward the hallway, her voice soft. "Is Daddy going to be okay?" "Daddy will be fine," I said. "He just needs to learn an important lesson." "What kind of lesson?" That when someone tells you they're hurting, you should believe them. When we came back down, Mark had managed to drag himself to the couch. He was curled up in the fetal position, still clutching his stomach. His skin was gray, his lips dry. "Julia," he rasped, "I'm sorry." "Okay. Is that what you want to hear?" "I'm sorry." I looked at him carefully. "Sorry for what, exactly?" He swallowed. "For not believing Ella. For not helping her." I shook my head. "No, Mark. You're not sorry. You're scared. You want help now because you need it. That's not the same as understanding what you did." Ella tugged on my hand. "Mommy, if Daddy says sorry, shouldn't we forgive him?" I knelt beside her. "Sometimes, sweetheart, people need to really understand what they did wrong before we can forgive them. Daddy's not there yet." We spent the rest of the afternoon in the backyard. Ella blew bubbles and sang little songs. I watched her spin in circles, laughing, free of the heaviness she carried a few weeks ago. Mark's face appeared at the window once. Pale, hollow. He watched her silently, then vanished again. Around dinner time, he reappeared in the kitchen, hunched and trembling. There was a paper in his hand and his phone beside it. "What's this?" I asked. "My mother's number," he said, voice broken. I was going to ask her to come help. I almost laughed. "The same woman who sent you to school with a fever and called you weak for crying when you broke your arm? You think she's going to help you with a stomach bug?" His shoulders shook. Ella climbed onto the chair beside him. "Daddy, you look like I did when I was sick." He nodded, his eyes full of tears. "I'm so sorry, baby. I should have believed you." "Why didn't you?" she asked, so simply it hurt. He looked at me, then back at her. "Because when I was little, my daddy told me that being sick was bad. That strong people don't get sick." "But everybody gets sick sometimes," Ella said. "Even superheroes. I saw it on TV." He gave a short, broken laugh. "You're right." She reached out, patted his shoulder. "When I was sick and you didn't help, it made me think you didn't love me." His face crumpled. I do love you," he said, his voice shaking. "So much. I didn't know how to show it." "Mommy says grown-ups learn wrong things sometimes," she said, "but then they can learn better things." Mark looked at me again. "Don't look at me for rescue," I thought. "This is your mess to clean." That night, after Ella had taken her bath and carefully arranged her stuffed animals in their proper places, Mr. Bunny on the right, Bear on the left, Princess Unicorn at the bottom of the bed, she turned to me and asked, "Can Daddy help me with bedtime tonight?" I hesitated. Mark was still recovering, still pale and slow, still walking like every step required negotiation with gravity, but I nodded. "If he wants to," I said. Mark had been sitting on the edge of the couch, head bowed. He looked up, surprised. I do," he said quietly, "if she wants me to." And so he did. He followed her upstairs, carefully holding the railing, while she bounced ahead, narrating every step. First we brushed teeth, then pajamas, then story. "You can pick the book tonight, Daddy." He watched her brush with serious focus, nodded solemnly when she showed how she could reach her back molars now. He fumbled with her pajama buttons, his hand still trembling, but she didn't complain. When it came time for the story, he chose one about a little elephant afraid of water. She nestled under the covers, watching him as he read. When he reached the part where the elephant learns he doesn't have to be afraid anymore, Mark's voice caught. Ella didn't comment. She simply reached out, patted his hand, and said, "It's okay to be scared sometimes. Mommy says even brave people get scared." He closed the book, kissed her forehead, and whispered, "You're the bravest person I know." After she fell asleep, he sat there for a while, watching her breathe, her small chest rising and falling, her arms tangled around her unicorn. I stood at the door unseen. When he finally emerged into the hallway, he swayed slightly, gripping the wall. "Let me help you," I said, surprising myself. He looked at me with something like gratitude, but also grief. I offered my arm, and he leaned on me as we walked back downstairs. Once in the guest room, I fetched him another glass of water, a cold washcloth, and the anti-nausea tablets from my nurse's kit. As I set them down on the nightstand, he reached for my hand. "I want to see someone," he said. "A therapist. Someone who can help me understand why I'm like this. Why I couldn't see what I was doing to her." I pulled my hand back, gently. "That's a start. Would you come with me? For family therapy?" "Maybe," I said. "Eventually. But you need to do the work on your own first. You need to understand the depth of what you've done, not just to her, but to the way she sees herself." He nodded slowly, exhausted. "I know. I'm terrified that I've already broken something in her." "She's resilient," I said, "but not the way you think. She's resilient because she's been loved, because she has at least one parent who believes her when she says she's hurting." He closed his eyes. "She should have had two." I didn't respond. I returned to Ella's room to check on her one last time. She was sleeping peacefully, Mr. Bunny tucked under one arm, her braid draped across the pillow. I kissed her forehead and whispered, "You did so good, baby. You taught him more than I ever could." Downstairs, the house was quiet. I heard Mark shifting in the guest room. Not the sounds of pain anymore, but of movement, of someone trying to reclaim something he thought he'd lost. The next morning, he emerged on his own, still weak, still shaky, but walking. Ella noticed first. "Daddy's walking," she squealed, beaming. He smiled faintly, lowering himself carefully into the chair across from her. She slid her plate of toast toward him. "You can have this one, Daddy. It helped my tummy." He looked at the toast like it was a sacred offering. He took a bite and managed to keep it down. Ella clapped softly. "Yay, that means your tummy's learning to be better." He chuckled, a tired, broken sound. "It's learning." Later that day, a knock came at the door. Tom from Mark's office stood on the porch, holding a box. Inside was his laptop, some files, and a letter on company letterhead. They'd let him go. Ella peered into the box. "Is Daddy in trouble?" she asked. "Something like that," I said. Mark didn't speak for a while, just sat on the bottom stair, reading the letter again and again. "I ruined everything," he whispered. "No," I said. "You're just finally seeing it." That afternoon, Ella painted while he watched. She showed him how to mix colors, told him pink was made from red and white and green was made from blue and yellow. He dipped the brush uncertainly, then painted a blob of green in the corner of the page. "What is it?" she asked. "I don't know yet." "That's okay," she said. "Sometimes we don't know what we're making until we're done." Later, when I tucked her in, she asked, "Mommy, is Daddy going to be okay?" I paused. "What do you think?" She yawned. "I think he's trying, and trying is the most important part." I kissed her forehead. "That's what wise people say." She rolled over, clutching Mr. Bunny. "Mommy, tomorrow can we all have breakfast together? Like a real family?" I didn't answer right away, but something in my chest loosened. "We'll see," I said, and for the first time in weeks, I almost meant it.